so that means that what we typically see about 8 to 10 years before the anatomical studies can actually see things.
Welcome to the True Health Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, stress, inflammation, and functional health clinician.
And I'm your co-host, Brigitte Spurgeon, metabolism and nutrition expert.
This podcast is where we bring hope, truth, and inspiration for your holistic health journey.
Because the world needs the best version of you. Hello, and welcome to the True Health Solutions podcast. My name is Brigitte Spurgeon. I am your host today, stepping in for Dr. Lonnie Bagwell, and I have a special guest for all of you. I'm super excited to welcome the dynamic Dr. Kat. And you know what, Dr. Kat, you are actually going to have to pronounce your full name because I probably will completely botch it. But let me go ahead and just share a little bit about you for our audience. So I've known Kat for, a few years now, actually maybe 4 or 5 years. I have been seeing you for my thermography appointments. You have been a welcomed part of our clinic, coming in once, 2, maybe even sometimes 3 times a year to serve our patients and taking care of their breast health and their general wellness. So we really appreciate knowing you, Dr. Kat. Dr. Kat is a doctor of natural health, right? And you have advanced certification in clinical thermography. And you work in the Charlotte area with one of my favorite doctors, Dr. Phil Arnone. Shout out to him in Matthews, North Carolina. So welcome, Dr. Kat. Thank you for being with us today. We're excited to have a conversation about women's health and about medical thermography. So Dr. Kat, will you, share your full name so that we can get that pronunciation, and then just share a little bit with our audience how you got into this field and why you're so passionate about what you do.
Great. Well, thank you, first of all, for the privilege to be here. You know, women's health is that's my thing. And I absolutely love any time I get to share. It's so important that women get their power back and stand their ground in today's world, especially. My full name, Dr. Katherine Wassung, and that's with a G on the end, Wassung. It's German, not Chinese. When I was getting my doctorate years ago, I realized that thermography, I had been doing thermography myself for a very long time, but I felt like the legs underneath what I wanted to do needed to be thermography. And the more I studied, the more I realized that was absolutely the truth for me. Thermography is just such a great health discovery tool, and it just enhances other things that we're trying to do. And so the main thing that got me into the health field was my mother, who was she miraculously got healed of a cancer that they gave her 6 months to live, and she lived 14 more years. But she died from a radiation poisoning, actually. And so radiation has been, pun intended, my hot button for a long time. And I've done more than a decade's worth of studying radiation and trying to direct people to a healthier health study, which is what thermography actually does. It's safe, it's effective, it sees things years before a lot of the anatomical studies can. And I just find that to be brilliant. And it's an opportunity for people to take control of their health at an early stage and make changes, because the body is such an amazing thing. It's such a fantastic thing that we have, the way the body is designed to heal itself. I think God just gave us great opportunity to take care of ourselves all by ourselves. And that's so wonderful. So my job, I feel, is to empower women to know that about themselves, to know how wonderfully they're made, and to help them in the journey, as an advocate. So, yeah.
And that's actually a word that I definitely use for you. You're a clinician, you're an educator, a leader, and you're a women's health advocate. So thank you for that. I really I can see how God has worked in your life, and I can see how that you have stepped into your calling and you walk in your calling every single day. There's no doubt that you wake up with passion and purpose, and it comes out. I've been the patient on the other side. I've been the patient in the room with you, and you have conviction, you have truth, you have compassion, yet still boldness, right? And I even remember a time when you took me. I had a little bit of a breast scare, and you were the person that I went to first, and you were able to walk me through that part of it with thermal imaging, which I followed up with lab testing, and then took care of the root cause of the issue. And I could walk that path empowered and with my faith, and equipped to do the right things versus in fear, which I feel like happens a lot of times with diagnoses. And certainly whenever the C word comes up, there's so much fear with that, and that fear a lot of times can stop us in our tracks, and can make us feel like we have lost our power.
Yeah. Yeah. The fear that's in the world today is trying to rule the world, trying to rule people. And that's the biggest thing, when people come in and I see it in their eyes. And this is one of the first things I say, and it's one of my favorite. It's a biblical verse from the Old Testament, but it's neither fear ye their fear nor be afraid. We don't have to own that collective body of fear that's out there. That's not ours to own at all. And that's really the first step in taking your power back. And then your own fear, logical thinking, no fear is power, love, and a sound mind. And sound mind is what we must have today. It's so important. And I love all that you just said. And yeah, when you love going to work more than you do going home. I mean, I just love to work. I love the women that I get to be with. Well, men too, because I see a lot of men as well. But just being with people and helping them to take their power back is just such a privilege and an honor, and I'm so thankful that I get to do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're going to have many listeners who may never have heard of thermography before, and actually have no clue what we're referencing. So, do you mind just giving everyone an overview of what thermography is, and maybe even just walk through what an appointment would look like? And even, I know I really value the medical report that we get afterwards. So maybe just walk us through the
Sure.
explanation and the process of thermography.
Sure. So, first of all, it's a study of physiology. So, you've got your anatomical studies, you've got mammograms, CAT scans, ultrasounds. What did I leave out? MRIs. And those are all anatomical views of the body. Thermography is very different. We are adjunct to all of those studies or screenings, um, but we see physiology or function. So that means that what we typically see about 8 to 10 years before the anatomical studies can actually see things. So if, for instance, there's tumor formation happening, it typically requires angiogenesis, which is the network of blood supplies that surround that funky little cell and then in the tumor itself, and then it starts to grow. But that takes cell replication, years and years. So the interesting thing about thermography is we can see that because we can see vascular things, we can see angiogenesis, but we also see inflammation, and we are the only tool that sees inflammation. None of the anatomical screens actually see inflammation. And the way disease progresses, it always starts with stress and inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing when it does its job, which is to help the body heal itself. But when it doesn't, do that, and it becomes chronic inflammation, then we're starting to go down that pathway of disease. And so those early things is what thermography can have a look at. And then we can say, okay, time to get on the ball and let's do something about that. And so we can start the healing process much earlier. And so it's really great for just about everything, because I can do these head to toe studies. And what we see, we're considered black bodies that emanate infrared heat 24/7. And it's on a specific color spectrum, white being the hottest, blue being the coldest. And neither of those things are good or bad. It just depends on where we see what. And so that's what I spend a great deal of time looking at with people, and where do we need to make the corrections for the colors to be in the right place. So I can do things like, if I do a full body, we will view things like the sinuses and the dental issues, the thyroid, the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular system, the liver, the stomach, the large and small intestines. Any vascular issues in the legs. We can see postural things. We can see structural things. All these kind of things that give us information, like a discovery tool. And it's very incredibly helpful. And then we can also monitor. So if you're getting treatment with another practitioner and you want to know if it's working, there's one good way to find out, and that's take a good look at function in your body and see if it's changing, see if it's working. And so we can help monitor. We can help if you need to change tack, then that's when you do it, because it's not working. You've been doing the same thing for many months. Maybe it's time to try a different route. And so those are the areas that thermography becomes very helpful. I do an awful lot of athletes, tweaking. Well, if they're weightlifters and so forth, you can see if there's a little dysfunction and maybe out of balance in what they're doing, and so they can correct that. With the breast tissue, it's really interesting to, I can view the lymphatic system really well. And so if there's a lot of lymphatic, then we need to work on that. We need to help you move the lymph system. So many different issues. I work with a lot of holistic dentists, and we can see inflammation coming from dental issues, and that's very helpful too. So there's many different things, but that's kind of an overview of what. If you can see behind me, there's a picture of a thermogram right there on the wall. But if you go on my website, there's lots of examples of thermograms that I've done, but also changes that were made from one to the other. So it's really fun to see that, and then it's a hallelujah when you see the change. And so
This is, since you mentioned your website, this is probably actually a great time, if you don't mind giving our listeners your website so that they can connect with you that way, learn more about you at that place. I think that will be a great connection point.
Sure. It is www.thermographysharlotte.com. And you don't reverse that, because you won't get me. So it's Thermography Charlotte, not Charlotte Thermography, even though that's the name of my practice. So thermographysharlotte.com. And I've got loads of information on there, lots of different clinical studies, as well as pictures and so forth. And there's pictures of me on there hugging trees and things like that. So
fantastic. We will post the link to your website in our description as well as on our social media platforms. Fantastic. So walk our patients through, or walk our listeners through the process. So they would schedule an appointment with you, whether it be in your clinic or in like a satellite clinic like ours in Huntersville, North Carolina. And so the incoming patient or client, I know they probably fill out some paperwork, and you have some specific instructions for them. But when they come into the room, what can they expect?
They can expect a very comfortable atmosphere. A little chilly, because that's the only discomfort. There's no compression, there's no radiation, there's no touching, there's none of that. You just sit in a soft light room, And depending on which study you do, depends on whether or not, how much clothing you have to take off, because we do have to see skin. That's the important thing. The very high tech camera that I use, which is, by the way, the most advanced technology in the world for medical thermography. Um, and there's not a lot of them in the state of North Carolina. I have um, two of them. So um, it needs to see skin. So, but there's, it's a darkly lit room. There is a pre-scan protocol. So there's certain things, anything that affects the skin, like if you walk in and you've just had a hot cup of coffee, we're going to have to wait, or cold water. Things like deodorant, anything that masks the skin. The pre-scan protocol, which is on my website as well, tells you the things that you need to follow in order to get a really accurate study. Sunburn is another one. You don't want to come in with a sunburn, because that changes the lymphatic system also in the body. So we want to get an accurate reading. I want to mention too that this is probably the safest study for women with implants. Women with implants should never compress them. It just compromises the implant. So this is probably the best opportunity for women with implants to have a health check. And the other thing is, well, nursing women can certainly come. Pregnancy, all of those things, these are all good opportunities for people to get a study. There's nothing that's going to affect or harm or be invasive or intrusive in any way. But you come in, it really, I go over extensively the paperwork. I like to talk to you first. I want to know who you are, what you're like, those things are all part of you and health. And it makes it much simpler to help you with your journey, your health journey, if I know you. So I spend a great deal of time talking. Yep, that could be the only bad thing about it. I do an awful lot of consultation. So I just think that's important. And then the study itself is relatively fast. Obviously, if I'm doing a full body, it takes longer, but none of them go over an hour. So, a breast health takes 15, 20 minutes, and then the rest is me talking. A full body is, it's pretty thorough, back to front, head to toe. Um, but once that's done, I do go over it. I have taken the interpretation modules so that I can talk to you about it, so that you don't leave on pins and needles. Fear is my enemy, and it should be yours too. So I don't let anybody leave with any kind of trepidation. That's just not what this is about. So I'll go over it pretty thoroughly. So when you get the formal interpretation from, they're all board certified medical doctors that are really trained in this. When you get that back, it'll make a lot more sense and be a lot easier for you to understand. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple.
That's
You come in and you go out. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I love the safety of it. I know when I'm making personal health decisions, I value information and I value diagnostics. However, when I'm making choices around those things, if there are any risk factors, I have to weigh the risk to the benefit. So radiation's an example of that. There may, I have had an MRI in my life, but would I want to have multiple MRIs? Certainly not. And there are, everything's situational, of course, but I love having the tool of thermography. I think number one for my breast health, and for also for pre-screening, like you. My mom was also diagnosed with cancer, and now she was diagnosed at stage 4. So she didn't have the benefit of any kind of early detection. So she didn't have 14 years or anything. She had about 3 to 4 months. and I guess, yeah, it was 3 months. And so for me, it's important to be screened, to have information so that I can take care of myself and do the appropriate things. But then also things like, I know my husband saw you, and he has colon cancer in the family. And when he had done his research, he actually opted to use medical thermography as his screening tool, and as well as, like, lab testing, checking his microbiome and things like that, because he felt like those tools better equipped him to actually take the steps to take care of his gut, versus later detection, or just looking at the anatomy, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
So, by the way, this is a good time for me to mention that nothing we say is medical advice. I'm just talking about my own experiences here. So please don't take anything that I say or that Dr. Kat even says as medical advice. That is something that is done with your physician or with your clinician on a one-on-one basis. So, Dr. Kat, I would, do you have any, well, I know you have many success stories and testimonies and things like that, but do you have just a favorite one that comes to mind, that could just give us an idea of what your patients experience?
There's so many, I have many, they'll run through the files in my mind here. You know, I, when people come in, especially women come in for breast studies, I see a lot of fear coming in the door, and usually they've been scared by something they have found, or somebody's, they're being pushed out. The breast industry today is just fear driven. That's all I can say about it. It is, and it doesn't need to be. Our bodies are fairly simple, really, when and treating them is simple too. So the first thing I deal with is that fear. But this particular gal in mind came, and she was ready to cut her breasts off because of a fear based. She had another study. Well, anyway, she was fearful. And so I did the thermogram, and I went, hey, this is really not that big a deal. Let's work on some things. Let's give it to you. You've got plenty of time. Let's do some things. So there's many aspects to our health, and one of them is emotional. We have to be in tune, especially women. We're emotional creatures. We're made that way. That's how our bodies react to us. So there were several other things that I wanted her to do. Well, it was really interesting. Within 2 weeks, she had done some of those and called me back, and all her lumps were gone. I've seen her for 3 years since then. She's an amazingly different person. And, just to get the control of that fear and know that she could take her power back, do some very specific things, and be diligent and faithful. Faithfulness is the key. And voila, she's a healthy, wonderful gal. And I'll never forget that, because when I saw her face when she came in the door and I see her today, they are two different people. So that would be, and I've seen many very similar things like that. So I so enjoyed having people come in with fear and leaving laughing, because that's usually what happens.
You have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You have, like, if we want to be our best selves, if we want to be healthy, if we want to prevent or reverse disease, we have to be willing to put in the work. So, but it really helps to have a practitioner alongside you, giving you targeted, holistic, safe advice.
It's so interesting. We live in such a fast-paced, quick fix, click a button, and that, your body doesn't get to where it is in distress that way. So it's not going to get undistressed that way. So, you're right. You're so right. Being faithful, to be diligent with your protocols, is really very, very important. And I want to say one other thing. In today's world, one of the things you want to think about, we're so inundated with so many disruptions of things. EMFs is my other hot button, the electromagnetic field. And that's tons of radiation coming from everything, cell phones, computers, just so you don't want to add to that when you're trying to do health discovery. And that's why I love thermography so much, because it doesn't add to that toxic load that we're already up against every single day. So had to add that plug in.
I've noticed a few things just over the years working with you, and one is the diversity of patients that you work with. So you mentioned earlier, it's not just women and breast health. You work with men as well because looking at things like inflammation and organs and things like that. But also you work with all ages.
Mm,
This is not just a scan that you do over the age of 40. I've seen our patients as young as 18 and have actually significant findings that needed to be worked on. And then I have, as the clinician, partnering with you for the scans, I've been able to now have targeted conversations, literally about, a 20-year-old quitting smoking, starting to change their nutrition and really taking care of themselves. I've been able to, talk to young patients about hormone imbalance, inflammation, and it's been such a beautiful opportunity to do that. So, could you maybe share? So, I don't know, like the best opportunities to get a thermogram, sort of like age,
yeah,
conditions. I know cystic breast is a big one, like, dense
yeah.
breast tissue is a big one.
I love that you brought that up. It's so true. I see a lot of children these days, a lot of parents bringing their kids in that other practitioners just can't find reasons for what's going on. And so thermography is a really big key for that. And it's a lot easier to get a child to sit in front of a thermographic camera than it is to go to some of these other offices. So, my gals for breast health, I like to see them in their 20s, honestly, because the onslaught that they're up against is a lot different now than it was in my day years ago. Um, it's just different. It's a different world. And so if I can help them earlier go through the things that they need to do to keep their health, they won't have the problems when they get in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. I hate to say this, but we are seeing breast cancer earlier and earlier. I've had 3 women this year in their 20s that had it. And so we don't want to see that. We don't want that to happen. So the earlier I can see them and we can see things, your lymph system is so important. If we can see things like that and inflammation in the body, and we can get a handle on that at an early age, it's so vitally important. So the earlier the better for breast health. Young adults, gut health is huge. I mean, this, Brigitte. You work with that beautifully. So, discovering that, and you can see that with thermography really, really easily. And knowing that you got those issues at an earlier stage, you can correct that and then live a much safer, healthier life. So, the other thing is the liver, because that has it's such an important part of our detoxification pathways. And, thermography can really see if we have liver issues. And that has a lot to do with hormones and hormone balance and imbalance. And in the gut health, of course, we can see that as well. So these things, and the body is all connected. So we can't really, I typically am a breast specialist, but you can't just segment that out. And it's so important for the whole body to stay connected and do the similar things. Like if you're working on your gut health, it improves your breast health, right? So um, I say the younger the better. And with children, if they have issues that are just not being found, thermography is very helpful. One of the other things I will mention is there's a couple inflammatory chronic pain syndrome, which is a very real thing, cannot be seen with any other modality. And thermography is really the only type of study that can see chronic pain. And I have caught that on several people whose doctors told them they were crazy, and I proved that they weren't.
Wow.
It's such a, chronic pain syndrome is such a debilitating thing. And for people to have those answers and know that it's not in their minds, that they're not crazy, it's very helpful. So those are.
And and I love having, the first scan that you do, that becomes your baseline. And then when you have your follow-up studies done, then you can compare them side to side. And I love how you have everything on record, and then you can. So I know when I've been in to see you, you've been able to compare. So when I was having some symptoms, you were able to compare my physiology to a year before or 2 years before that, and that just empowered you with more knowledge, about the scan. So it's great to be able to see that and to have goals to improve your images the next time. I know I've over the years seen improvement with my hormone balance, and with my breast tissues. So thank you, Dr. Kat. You are just a wealth of information. You're a joy, and just such a blessing to everyone that you work with. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you would love to share with our audience?
Yes, something that I say all the time, and I believe it wholeheartedly, is everything is fixable across the board. Everything is fixable. Um, you know, Never lose hope. As long as there is breath life in you, there is hope. And we are connected to the greatest creator of there is, and to keep that level of vibrational frequency up in yourself is the most important thing. He's given us the tools that we need. Join with people that are like-minded. It's so important to have that compatibility, and that hopefulness. I just, hope is such a big deal. And I'm just so grateful that I get to work in an arena where that's the thing I work with best is hope. So it's just such an honor to be able to do what I do. I'm so very grateful. I'm very grateful to you, Brigitte, to give me this opportunity to just to speak with you and with your folks. And always an honor, always a privilege. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome. We're excited that Dr. Kat is going to be, she was just in our clinic a couple of weeks ago, and she was so busy. She probably barely had a chance to drink water or breathe, but she will be back in our clinic in, actually 2.5,
Couple weeks.
three,
Yeah.
3 weeks
Yeah.
time. And once again, connect with her through her website that we are going to be posting in the description. If you are a clinic in the Charlotte area, or actually, beyond, if you would want Dr. Kat to come in and speak for you, or if you would like to be a satellite clinic to have her in to work with your patients, you can reach out to her as well. So thank you so much for listening today, for joining us. I pray that this conversation is empowering and gives you hope on your journey to healing your body and becoming the very best version of you. So make sure that you share this episode, that you like and subscribe so that you can get future episodes. And you will see Dr. Bagwell and I on our next episode. Be blessed.
Thanks for joining us today on True Health Solutions Podcast. Make sure that you click to subscribe. Also, go to our website, www.truehealthcharlotte.com, where you can download any resources related to today's show or any future shows. And lastly, if you search for True Health Center Group on Facebook, you'll be able to join our free health community. We look forward to seeing you there.